Welcome to the Tied Together podcast, where we feature everyday people doing extraordinary things. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share so others can join in on the conversation too. Today's guest grew up in Co-op City of the Boogie Down Bronx, spent 6 years serving in the U.S. Air Force, and now has his own IT consulting firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. He's graced many stages performing original poetry for youth and adults alike, and turned life experiences into lessons he teaches the young men he mentors. Recently, Mario has created a workshop for fathers and sons to help navigate the differences between manhood and masculinity. Of all these things, his greatest accomplishments are his pride and joy, his son and daughter. Please welcome the author of A Son with No Father, A Book with No Author, Mario Reyes.
How are you doing today?
Hey!
Such a well articulated introduction. I like that. I felt like I was on like Sway in the Morning.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And as I've told guests prior, and it is really authentic, you have earned it. And that is not all of your accolades, all of the awesome things you've done, but I can't put it into a few sentences. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into who you are and why you're so awesome.
And that's why we're here. I'm excited to share this journey that I've been on for the last, when it feels like you lived at least 7 lives?
Yes.
You could track them. Like even when you say from the Boogie Down Bronx, Co-op City, I'm just thinking about what it was like on Bellamy Loop and how far removed I am from those experiences now.
Right? I get that. I want to say it's like chapters, but it's almost like separate books.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, one of the things that we touch on in the workshop that you were just referring to is how to put a period where there used to be a comma in regards to legacy and generational curses.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. Sometimes you need to start a whole new book, create a whole new playlist, and leave those memories exactly where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me, who is Poppy Picasso?
Poppy Picasso is a moniker that came about because I moved to Atlanta 5 years ago. And when I did, I was bald. I was bald because I created an endowment for my sister, and we were doing the ice bucket water challenge. And I told everybody, if we raise $5,000, I'll go bald. I'll cut my hair off and then let them do the ice bucket challenge. We raised $12,000.
Wow.
It was amazing. And when I moved down here, I just kept that same energy. However, when I was younger, I used to party in Atlanta. And I knew that Atlanta has a lot of distractions. And I was working from home full time for the first time, and I didn't want to mess anything up. So I started fasting. I gave up alcohol. I gave up cigars. I gave up partying. I gave up all the things that I felt would distract me from my purpose and being able to really responsibly handle business.
Mm-hmm.
So in doing so, I wanted to track that growth, and I started growing my hair. Didn't shave from August till Easter. So that's how long the fast lasted. And when it came over, everybody was just giving me the blues about my hair. Like, yo, what are you doing? Cut it. And I was like, you know what? Because y'all care so much, I'm gonna keep it. And then my homegirl calls me and she's like, giving me the blues. Like, what are you doing? I said, you talking about? I'm Papa Smooth. She goes, no, you look abstract. You're like Picasso. And I was like, wow, that was a good one. And then I thought about it. I was like, that actually really is a good one. Because you can't give yourself your nickname. Your nickname has to be given to you. That's how people, end up, reinventing themselves. I don't got to reinvent myself. I'm just adding on. So I said, you know what? You named me this. I then took it and I started using it on stage. I created a logo. It became a brand identity. The hair is now like past my chest. It's super long. And Poppy Picasso is a representation of, and I like the name also. So because it gives an ode to my Puerto Rican ancestry as well as my artistry. Mm-hmm. And my company is entitled Art Imitates Life.
Right.
So I am an embodiment of actual all forms of art, whether it be graffiti, breakdancing, rapping, poetry. Only thing I can't do is play an instrument.
Do you sing?
I I will destroy everybody's eardrum, but I'll do it.
Good.
I was just listening to Lauryn Hill singing my heart out.
That's what's up. So yeah, you mentioned that Poppy Picasso is not just your name, but your brand. Art imitates life. And I didn't know that until I started looking a little deeper into what you do. And I think it's dope that you have turned it into a brand. Can you tell people more about what the brand is?
Well, the brand everything revolves around authenticity. So art imitates life, life imitates art. That's the cycle, it's a triangle. And for the brand itself, I'm looking for other artists that I could publish, that I could help reach their dreams, that have that added level of sincerity and authenticity. In my life, personally, I prefer authenticity over audacity, value over volume, and character over accomplishment. So everything doesn't have to reach platinum status or the New York Times bestseller list. However, if I could assist you in selling 5,000 units of your book by helping you understand and opening up my channels to you, that's great. And then just for the Poppy Picasso brand himself, everything revolves around healing, whether it be from a fatherhood perspective, from a manhood perspective, mental health perspective, a love perspective. It's all about healing and analyzing yourself and being able to address the crux of trauma and hurt, and then how to build upon that. There was a poem I wrote a long time ago, and it came on the heels of when I was going through a real tumultuous time after I lost my sister. I was going through a divorce. And I read a poem when I was in a really good, happy space after a weekend with my kids. And when I read it, it was the most depressing thing I ever read. And it put me in a depressed mood. And I realized the power of what you put out there. So what I decided to do at that moment was to never write another pity poem. I could write a poem about hardship, but it has to be anchored, and it has to have an arc of inspiration and idealism and a solution. Right. And once I started writing like that, that's where I found my true value. That's why I started sharing my poetry, because I was finally able to match lessons with the experiences. That's hence dope. Art imitates life.
That's dope. That's dope. I do believe that there's power in words and what you say. And I have a nickname, but I did give it to myself because I was reinventing myself. Like you said, when you give yourself that nickname, you're reinventing. So
what's the nickname? I'm gonna hear this.
I'm gonna tell you. So when I was about 15 or 16 years old, I was 5'3" and probably in the high 80s, like 80 something pounds. Okay. Very skinny. And so when I would go meet up with the people in the hood, I would refer to myself as Big Quiche. There's nothing big about me, nothing, right? And I would always refer to myself as Big Quiche in the hood, at school, when I got older, at work and things like that. To the point when people now call me Big Quiche, but I didn't feel big then. Not just physically, but on the inside, I was
character-wise.
Yeah. Character-wise, I felt small. I did. I was very shy, and I'm very good at turning on confidence. I've grown into it, but when I was younger, I was good at
certainly a mechanism that New Yorkers have mastered. Like, we know exactly how. It's almost like how a lizard could change its color, chameleon color real fast. Like, if I see it's gonna be a kind of situation, I'll put that mask on and I'll puff up knowing I'm terrified inside.
Yes.
Knowing this isn't even how I want to act or my natural state of being, but I will never, or you will never look timid. You will always come across as confident. I understand totally.
Correct. But in changing the way I even referred to myself, started changing the way I felt about myself, to where eventually, after saying it for so long and then hearing it back from other people, I started to believe it, that I am big. There's a John Mayer song, "I'm bigger than my body gives me credit for." And I've always loved that line. Always loved that.
That's a bar.
Right? Right? So I do believe in speaking life into yourself, and of course speaking life into others, but you can't do that until you speak life into yourself first.
Talking about Big Keish and you being flaca. Growing up, when I was in high school, I graduated, I was 6'4", almost at 6'5", and 145 pounds.
Yikes.
I look like a parenthesis. You know what I'm saying?
No
like,
way.
just somebody like a floating in the wind. And my block, they used to call me Super Noodle.
I'm done.
And as an adult, you can't really say that because of any other connotation, you know?
All right.
We're just real innocent and they playing basketball, yo, Noodle, throw it. You know, it was crazy. It was like, that was my name.
Right. No, I got you. That's pretty funny. New Yorkers New Yorkers, Caribbean people, and I'm not leaving anybody out. This is just my experience in my life. We have the weirdest names for each other. The weirdest.
Especially like if you're from a block. Mm-hmm. You could live in a neighborhood and it's not a block. Mm-hmm. Like Co-op City is so big that every section has easily 100 kids that could play together, that grow up together. Mm-hmm. Like, and I mean that's conservative.
Right.
So when you're chilling on that wall or in your basketball courts and you got all these personalities and these huge characters coming together, the roasting starts and, you know, everything. It bursts very tough skin.
It really does. It really does. You have to learn how to really stick it through, which is why I think I was able to be in the car business for so long, because that's a rough industry. Emotionally. It's like a barbershop, but selling cars. You're just always getting on each other, always doubting somebody's skills. And I think my history of growing up in New York prepared me for that type of environment.
Sure. Give it up for being a saleswoman. I love salespeople.
Thank you. So I want to get into certain parts of your book, because I found the whole book interesting. And if you don't have the book, never mind my little sticky notes. I do leave notes. First of all, just the artwork on this, and I'm sorry for the glare, but the artwork on this is amazing.
So you want to see something dope?
Yes.
The same person that did that artwork did this artwork. God, Time Magazine in July. He just finished up John Legend's album cover, his latest album. You can see the originals behind me for all of this. So it's, you know, I could have went to a graphic designer, I could have went to Fiverr, but every perspective of the book, I wanted it to be a true representation of quality in art.
Yeah, your book is art through and through. It is art through and through.
I got a big smile because this has been a long path to get here. Mm-hmm. Like just the writing of the book was a 5-year labor of love. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to see it now, like in people's hands and they're digesting it, it's like, wow. Yeah. We did that, Bob, you know?
You know what I really appreciate, and I'm going to get into my question in just a second. What I appreciate is that you're a poet at heart. And so I'm a short story writer. That's what I do. So it is harder for me to write a book because I like to get to the point. And there are different styles of writing. So I really appreciate the fact that you are a poet and you took I can imagine the process was painful to not make this a big book of poems.
Well, I am a poet and I don't read poetry books because there's no narrative behind it.
Yeah. Typically, I love a good story.
Sporadic poems, and I'll take a piece here and there. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was about to get kicked out the Air Force back in 2001. Mm-hmm. And I started reading the 48 Laws of Power. Mm. This is before it gets super popular. This is way back when. Mm-hmm. And what I did was I started applying each law every day. Mm-hmm. And by virtue of God and that, I was able to stay in the Air Force. Mm. And I always liked the way it was written because it was a bunch of short stories, a bunch of parables. It was the law, the interpretation of the law, the reversal of the law, how to protect yourself. So when I wrote the book, I started realizing that there's certain aspects of it that need to be separated. Mm-hmm. So even though we'll be talking about race, let me give you insight as to the dialogue and the experience that happened. So if you enjoy narration, there's stories in this book for you.
Mm-hmm.
Then I wanted to break down how I felt and how I took how I felt and tried to apply it towards the teachings to my son. And in doing that, we took another step in elevation. So now you get to understand the logic of a man, a father, as he tries to navigate these very muddied waters.
Mm-hmm.
And then by virtue of being a poet, a MC, whatever you want to call it, you're not from the Bronx, so because we thought we were writing raps, but we were writing poetry.
Oh, yeah.
So by virtue of that, I had to anchor every single piece with a poem to let you know. Sometimes if you didn't understand my purpose in the first two iterations, by that last one, by that poem, you'll have no more questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Explain, what is a purpose, first of all? What is your definition of what a purpose is?
My definition of a purpose would be what the highest priority you have and how you apply your effort and labor towards that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I speak to kids in high school, I always tell them that success isn't a destination, it's a journey.
Right.
And it's a culmination of choices that you make along that journey that will determine your level of success.
Mm-hmm.
It's not successful or unsuccessful, because life isn't that black and white.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quantifiable like that. So a mistake may provide you a better lesson, made you take 2 steps forward, but now you could skip 50 paces. Whereas if you get every small win, you're only taking a 1 step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, my purpose in life is to highlight specifically and destroy certain stereotypes and do collective healing from my ministry, and which is fatherhood and manhood. I believe I sincerely embody those. And it's not, I know self-praise is no real recommendation. However, based upon enough people pushing me to finally assume that leadership and public role, I reluctantly did it, but I did it coming with an artifact to show what concentration towards your priorities looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I hear you when you say, speak about praising yourself, but I do still think it's important to. I'll give you an example for it. My son's 16, and for probably the first 13 years of his life, I didn't think I was doing a good job. I would hear it from people that I was doing a great job and look how he's turning out, but I did not feel like I was doing a good job. I beat myself up to no end, partially regarding the fear of who he'd be when he became a teenager. I was always very scared about that because I was your poster child, bad teenager. Okay.
You were there.
Yeah.
You
Just
were there.
didn't listen, didn't do none of that stuff. So
Just
I was.
the first pages, I tell you who I am. I said,
Mm-hmm.
I graduated high school with a 1.8 GPA.
Mm-hmm.
That does not get it. I did not, we did not come from a dynamic of always being what we become.
Right, right. And you also spoke about in your book, there was one, I can't quote it verbatim, but you were speaking about being afraid of destroying your son emotionally and like his soul. And I found it interesting because I'd never heard another parent express it. I felt it, but I never heard another parent express it. And my sister helped me out with that feeling because she said, if you weren't a good parent, you wouldn't think about it. You just let it go to the wayside. Tell me about how you felt in those moments where you felt like you were failing.
I'm like, those moments are still occurring. They're
Mm-hmm.
not. Parenthood, as in success, is a journey. I think my dad told me that he didn't feel like he was confident in what he did for me until I called him one day in Korea when I was deployed, drunk, and just thanking him for all the great memories that I had. And when I came home, we went fishing. I was 23 years old, and he said he could die happily because he knows he's leaving his wife and his sister and the family in the hands of a man. Mm-hmm. So I don't know when that aha moment is going to come for me, or if it's even going to be that clean of an aha moment. But as it comes now, communication is the strongest tool for unification. And as me and my son go through this together, we'll hit some roads, but we always come back and have a heart-to-heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's in those moments where he realizes that I'm still a flawed human being, but I have the right intention
mm-hmm.
and direction for him.
Right.
And sometimes if you don't do it together and you're not taking it upon yourself and taking the initiative and being forthcoming, mm-hmm. you may feel like you're failing.
Right.
However, typically when we come back and we have that heart-to-heart, he'll tell me everything I want to hear, of course, but I watch afterwards and I see just a little bit better at something. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, we're getting there.
Right.
It's incremental steps.
I was starting off saying that it's okay to pat yourself on the back because now I do feel like a good mother, even though I still have my failure moments. But I think that the biggest thing that I could do is apologize to my son when I'm wrong and acknowledge that I'm wrong. Because as I don't know if this is all parents, but for me as a parent, I often feel like the one that is right in the conversation. Like my point of view is the only point of view and yours is wrong. And I've had to, and still am learning to listen to him, to acknowledge when I am pushing my own biases on him and not allowing him to form his own opinions. And
that's exactly the part that you sourced in the book. Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I felt. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I prepare him without shattering him?
Right.
Without making a clone of myself and all of the experiences that I've gone through.
Right.
Because that toolbox he may not be able to utilize it the same way.
Right. Right. It's completely different environments. And I heard you speak about once preserving the innocence of a boy specifically.
Yeah.
Tell me about why that's even important.
Well, one, I think that there's this cycle, especially in certain communities, that girls mature faster physically, so they start reaping different attention that they're not prepared for. So they're forced to grow up faster. So they look at their peers as if they're immature. Mm. So the boys in their the shattering of their with their newfound inadequacies for still wanting to preserve that level of immaturity and innocence, because that's really what immaturity is as a child. They start trying to be what they believe that the girls want. Mm-hmm. More mature, so they'll put themselves in more precarious situations. They'll force, like even me, just being honest, I lost my virginity due to peer pressure. Mm-hmm. I was getting snapped on my block, and I was like, enough of this.
Right.
And those kind of things don't allow you to process the level and the big decision you're making and feel good about it.
Right.
So when we're forcing ourselves to grow up, we're further corrupting the stem closer to the root. Mm-hmm. And I want to see the flowers bloom. I want you to be proud about your decisions. Mm-hmm. And that comes by being real with yourself.
Yeah.
Not doing it for anybody else.
Yes. I've always been a huge advocate for allowing children to be children. My son, when his father passed, he was 5 years old. And a lot of men in particular would tell him he's the man of the house now. He has to take care of his mother now. What kind of pressure is that? Is what I asked myself then and ask myself now. Is that for a 5-year-old? He's already dealing with the loss of his father, and now he has to be the man? There were times where men would say that to him, and I wouldn't say anything, and I would take him home and explain to him that he is a child, and it is okay to be a child. You don't have to worry about if you're going to be fed or anything like that, because I'm providing that for you. Just be a kid. Because
that goes to the toolbox we were referring to. Think about it. When the criminalization, as if it's new, but the criminalization of Black culture removed so many people from the households in the 80s. Mm-hmm. The drug epidemic removed so many people from the household in the 80s. crime and everything that comes along with that package. Back then, the little boys had to assume the role of a man because their mothers or their caretakers were wrestling with everything else themselves. Those same issues, as well as working 2 jobs and having to leave the kids by themselves. Technology and all this new advent of oversharing didn't exist. You had your village, and sometimes your village was too broken. And if you invited that into your household, it'll make it even worse. So that, you know how many of my friends like raised themselves, learned how to cook when they were like 8?
Right.
They
and not out of neglect, out of necessity.
And had to take care of So I think, whereas the intention is in the right place, when people say that, that's because they've never looked into the mirror and realized they're not in that environment no more. The predicaments that you're living in and that you're going to offer your son have changed.
Right. And I witnessed.
You don't have to be a boy. You don't have to be a man.
Right.
You're not my man.
Okay.
You are a boy. You are my son. The role that you have here is one of the most important, if not the most important, in my life. So you cannot fulfill certain things for me. It's not your job to provide for me.
Right.
If you do so, it is truly by virtue of you recognizing the lessons I'm teaching you and allowing yourself the proper development.
Right. And I think we need to afford our young boys the opportunity to be little, to feel, to express feeling, because too many times we run into men who are reliving childhoods they never had. And I never wanted my son to be trying to grasp at straws for a childhood he could never get back. So I tell him all the time, even at 16, you are becoming a man. You are still a child. Enjoy the childish things. You'll be a man and you can't go back then.
I said the high unhappiness rate I attribute to supply and demand. The woman had to learn how to survive in the absence of her man. The boys extend their adolescence in the absence of a man. And the family structure has done nothing but suffer in what? The absence of that man. That's what this book is for. It is a call to action. Come front and center, fellas. Let's build. I have friends that are not a part of their children's lives, and I will not allow them to be a part of my life until they resolve that. And I let them know that what my friendship means is whatever you need to facilitate that. That's what I'm here for.
Right.
It's redeemable. The sooner the better, though.
Why is it that, and I agree with you, I've had relationships like that with female friends who, for one reason or another, were not right to their children, and that just didn't sit well with me. But why is it that you play that role in other men's lives? You come from a 2-parent household with an awesome father, from what I can tell, that was not only raising you and your siblings, but people in the neighborhood, people that you didn't know. And you would think the normal path is to just, repeat that, raise your son well, be a present father, and not necessarily send that on to other men. Was he your inspiration to reach other men as well, or did you notice that something was lacking?
My dad is a recluse. He is. If you know him, you know all of him.
Okay.
Let me not say that. If you know him, you know what he'll give you. He'll give you advice and all other things. But I'm 39 now, and I'm still peeling back layers of that onion in our relationship. He's not going to be forthcoming with everything. Last time he came here, we had a conversation. He put me on to some other trauma that happened in the family. I just don't know. But one thing he told me that time we went fishing, he said what he admires most about me is my ability to communicate. He doesn't have that. So he was honest with me as to what he felt like he lacked in his toolbox. And you have to, at some point in your life, recognize what your strengths, what your SWOT is, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So I realized that there's a threat in my community, and the threat is the absence of maturity and manhood.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got a lot of niggas out there.
Mm-hmm.
But how many of them aren't applying the same virtues to manhood?
Right.
So now I realize it's semantics. Because if I tell them you're not a man, I'm automatically defended. We got to go fisticuffs. Whereas if I explain to you how I define it,
mm-hmm.
and you're unable to align correctly with it, or if some of your actions, maybe your means of generating income conflict with that of the community, you know, I don't have to spell it out for you no more.
Right.
So I don't want to ever be somebody that just watches everything happen. One of the best bits of advice I ever got in my life was from, let's just say, a nomad. He came in and out of my life in that day. He said, be a thermostat, not a thermometer. A thermometer could tell you the temperature of its environment. A thermostat controls it. And he told me that, and as that resonated with me throughout my life, I made sure I wanted to become an agent of change. So instead of just duplicating it and doing it, I could still duplicate it and lead by example. However, as an orator, you have to speak to the level of your audience.
Right.
So I have no problem. Like, I'm the liaison for everybody in the hood. Like, I could talk to somebody in corporate America, a celebrity elsewhere, an athlete elsewhere, and then be on the block or working with dudes when they come home, and in Baltimore to reduce the recidivism rate. Like, I've put myself in enough scenarios in which the hairs on my neck won't stand up.
Mm-hmm. And when you say come home, you're referring to come home from jail or prison, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Like,
just so people understand.
We were working with brothers and putting them in positions in the community, so that way they could start feeling some level of ownership in the community instead of just taking from it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard because you got to remember the circumstances a lot of these people come from. That community has done nothing but take from them. It
mm-hmm.
took lives, it took their innocence, it took their health, it took their freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a story behind how everybody gets to where they are. You know, I don't believe that anybody's born bad. You know, they have a slew of experiences that bring them to where they are. So you may hear that somebody's a felon or they did some kind of crime, but there's something that brought them there. And in order for them to now become a productive member of society and find their purpose, they need some level of grace from somebody.
That's a beautiful word.
Isn't it?
Think, and again, semantics matters. How do you define grace?
Unearned kindness, unearned care. Mm-hmm. You don't deserve it, but you get it.
I think you could receive grace and be deserving of it as well.
Of course, yeah.
You know, like, you can. I'll be honest, like, Friday was like the best day I've had in a very long time.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it was just like good news after good news, and I was like, oh, this is dope. Like, this is what it feels like. I want to do this again. And then I realized, like, I feel undeserving of it, but I also look back and I'm like, I put in work. Mm-hmm. It's not by mistake. You know, mm-hmm. It's a reward also. I think grace could also be a reward.
Yeah, that's true.
A job well done.
That's true. I'm learning more about the word grace and being able to extend it to others, because I was very rigid in thought for a very long time. And, you know, if you wrong me in any way, shape, or form, I'm cutting you off. And I had to, first of all, God extended grace to me, right? And so I'm thanking God for, you know, still being who he is and still offering me grace. And then I think about the times other people have forgiven me. And I had to really sit with myself and say, well, why aren't you offering this to other people? Mm-hmm. If they're being so gracious with you, then why can't you forgive somebody for the wrong that they've done? Now, of course, there's levels to the wrong. Sometimes it is good to distance yourself from certain people, but sometimes people are people, they make mistakes. And if you can address something with somebody and whether you agree to disagree or simply agree, you can offer them some grace. So I'm really learning what that is and being able to extend that to other people.
Ergo, this, like, we talked about the journeys earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It never ends. It should never end.
No.
So I'm looking at 40 and I'm finally realizing how much I don't know and how much I want to learn.
Yeah.
You know what my son's favorite phrase is?
What's that?
No. And I laugh and I'm like, you don't get it yet. Like, the reality is, how could you if I don't?
Right. Right. I get it. I want to ask you something about not really your relationship with your son, but his mom. So a lot of people have to navigate divorce and dealing with children. So you and your wife, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, lived in Baltimore before you lived in Georgia. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
so, and you were divorced in Baltimore.
Correct.
Right. So you found a way to both of you moving to Georgia and figuring out an agreement and an arrangement to be able to raise both of your children, your son and your daughter. And not many people find a way to navigate that. Before we get to how you found a way to navigate it, can you tell me a little bit about, and as much as you're comfortable with, the downward spiral before you both could peak, what the feeling was like, at least?
Let me share this. I found out the hard way that life takes its course. But I honestly became a better father after my divorce. I learned how to nurture a newborn baby girl, cries that I could no longer ignore, because when there's no one else, it's on you to perform. And then communication between my ex-wife and I went from all-out war to a civil discourse. You see, once we packed up all of our personal shit and behaved as if we wanted what was best for our kids, that's when it stopped being about us and it became about them. Because love doesn't have to live in the same crib when you're able to use those beautiful children as the bridge.
It's beautiful.
So in that, youth and pride and all the other things all contribute to explosive situations that, you know, we're getting divorced. Divorce is hard. It's harder when you're sitting across the table with someone that you used to share a bed with, and now you're negotiating the terms in which you're going to raise the most important parts of your respective lives. So mediation was a very hard thing to navigate, but we got through that. And when we got through that, we had a dossier, a legal document on co-parenting that we were going to apply going forward. What this does is make sure there's no room for miscommunication. And anything outside of that that we decide to do for the children or each other is by grace, the grace that we were just referring to.
Yes.
And in the beginning, grace wasn't easily found because there's no baseline for trusting that you will reciprocate. And we're both from New York, and we didn't want to raise the kids in Maryland anymore. So I have a large family in New York, but I'm from a different side of New York. I'm from the Bronx. She's from Long Island. I said, oh no. My sister warned me a long time ago about inviting all of that attention back to yourself.
Gotcha.
Sometimes you can love people from a distance. I love going back, visiting. They got my whole heart. But every day, taxing me for the role that I've assumed in this family, I said, nah, I'm used to being by myself. Your family's in Atlanta. Let's go down there. Because it's important to raise the kids around their family. Whether it's my family or hers, it's family to them.
Right.
And our families, we were still good with each other's families. So it wasn't a scenario in which I felt like I was ostracized. They always keep a door open for me, a seat at a table, a plate made in the event that I'm ever hungry, you know. And again, sometimes pride, sometimes drawing a line may not allow me to take advantage of it all the time, but just knowing that it's there and and that's reciprocated vice versa, we're able to show the children that love colors outside of the lines. You know, watching your Disney shows will tell you that, and your movies is that, you know, you got to love colors within these parameters. Love is messy. Love doesn't have to look the same all the time.
Right.
Like, she birthed my children. Of course I love her. I'm gonna love her till the day I die. However, that love isn't romantic. It isn't what would create the foundation for the household and the peace that I wanted to live. So when my kids see us interact, or we are forthcoming to move located together, if we got to take a vacation together, all right, that's cool. We could do all of those things, but y'all understand that there's, like, when you're young, you draw lines in the sand. You're on that side, I'm on this side. You get older, you realize those lines, you can still draw a line, but it's gonna be squiggly. To fit in, to give out sometimes more, and to receive more at times. And that's what we learned. So just being able to demonstrate that, I tell people all the time, you know how many people I gave my parenting agreement to? These are important. You know how many relationships my parenting agreement has ended of mine? Sometimes people aren't willing to, your amicability confuses them because they've never seen that before.
Gotcha.
They think it has to be one way or the other. No. And when you are the living example of a variable, of something that people aren't familiar with, you get side eyes, you get looks, but it doesn't matter because those kids have great spirits and they're not jaded about love, and they understand that we can all coexist happily, and regardless of the different flavors or structures it takes on, it's always going to be family first.
Right.
And when we made the decision that we were going to have them prior to them being here, we became family, married or not. Right.
Let me ask you this. When you were reaching the point to where you were willing to sit your pride to the side and, in essence, humble yourself in order to make this new relationship work between your ex-wife and yourself, were there things that you felt right about but kept it to yourself because it wasn't worth the turmoil it could cause?
What's the bigger picture? What's the opportunity cost? If I have to address everything that... So once you decide to get divorced, what you're saying is, I don't want to argue with you anymore.
Okay.
So after we get to the point in which we have this agreement, anything outside of it, or sometimes things within it, I may still feel like they're lopsided. It's leaning one way or the other. How much does it cost me to do it, though? What peace does it take away from me? If my only answer is pride and or finances, it's not worth it. If it's going to have an adverse effect on the children, then now it's open to debate.
So you were willing to give in areas, you were willing to give parts of yourself in certain areas, and just in order to benefit the children, even though you may have liked it or not, and you were also willing to be silent because it wasn't worth it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's not always worth it. You have to, if you want that peace that you so desperately sought, that you paid money with lawyers and all this time, don't get divorced and then continue arguing.
Right.
Whether she understands my perspective of not or not, are the kids going to benefit from it?
Right. Did you both reach that point of peace at the same time?
I don't know. I can't answer that question because I don't know. I can't answer when she feel
That
like
makes
she got
sense.
hers. I do think that like we're pretty much the same age. We known each other since we were 24, so we kind of grew up together. Like, so now it's almost like a sisterly relationship. So there's times now where she may throw some advice my way, vice versa. And I just feel like you just grow up, and we always kept really good circles around each other who were able to give us that 1,000-foot view and saying, nah, y'all, you look good. Like, give him some grace here, give her some grace here. And eventually, all the advice that we received from our respective masterminds led to us not needing to even ask them anymore.
That's dope. So where are y'all at now?
No, we're out the block. Cool. Like, it's not like I went with her and the kids invited me to her birthday party. So I went to her birthday party.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Of course, I want you to have a happy birthday. 40 years, live another 45, 50.
Right.
Live.
Good.
You know, live, because the longer you live, the happier they are. The more successful you are, the happier they are. Anything that I could do to facilitate them being happier in life and more successful and more well-rounded people, doesn't matter what else I take. You know,
I think it's dope that you two could, even though the journey was rough getting there, you two could be a shining example that it's possible. It is possible.
It could always go left again.
Right.
You could always end up at odds. But one thing that we always say is, don't confuse the politics from the business.
Okay.
Politics is the bullshit. The politics is you getting caught up in your feelings and your pride and all these other insecurities or miscommunications. The business is the kids, though. The business is making sure you're healthy and your family's good. Because again, everything goes back to those children. That's the tie. That's a soul tie that can never be severed.
Right.
So yeah, there's politics always. There's always politics as usual on my Jay-Z. But does that mean I'm not going to pick them up from school? I think too many times, especially when I deal with, like, when I do some mentorships for some of my brothers, they allow the politics to determine the business and vice versa. You know, sometimes a woman isn't being loved from her man the way she wants to, so she keeps the child away from him. Sometimes he may feel like she's asking for too much in child support, so he doesn't call his daughter every day.
Right.
Like, those are moments in which you're allowing politics and business to merge and adversely affect those kids.
Yeah, because the thing is that even though you feel angry or slighted or whatever it is, and if you're the dad and you decide not to call or pick him up, or if you're the mom and you decide to keep the child away from that father, the other parent, the child is internalizing that. It then becomes a question of self-worth and value and, you know, am I good enough? Do you like me enough? Sorry?
Like, am I the cause of all of this?
Right.
They're arguing about me.
Right.
So I must be the problem. There's something dysfunctional here.
And parents, I think, as a whole, have to keep in mind that the human brain is not fully developed till you're 24 years old. So I don't care what kind of conversation you're trying to have with your child, that their father's the worst person on earth. And if the father is not the worst person on earth, don't say that to your child. And vice versa, if the mother's not the worst person, don't say that, because their little brain is not receiving it in the way you're trying to project it.
I'll give you a perfect example of what you asked. You asked, are there points in which I disagree with her, and do I shut up? Writing this book, this is my story from my perspective. It's my son that I'm addressing, my namesake. What did it take me to say, here, read this, and make sure you are okay with it?
And you're speaking about his mother.
Yeah.
Yes.
What did that take out of my creative process?
Mm-hmm.
And then she highlighted parts. I don't really like this part, da 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 da. And there was parts that were her opinion, and I was like, well, it's staying in there because that's just your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
But the parts that I did redact and remove from the book, sometimes I felt like it added value to the book.
Mm-hmm.
How much value?
Right.
Is the value enough to go against her and her feel a kind of way, or maybe even try to put a stop order out on the book, or just maybe she just eats it and now she doesn't have the same level of trust in me, you know? So that I have the best interests of the kids at heart. These are the things that I'm referring to. So we'll ride it out, and we'll later on in life when we're older and we meet each other at my son's wedding or whatever, maybe we could reflect and say, well, I hated when you did this, but for what at that point? We already succeeded at the bigger picture.
Right. Right. I agree. So when I was reading your book, I think you were either doing a live or you had just posted about your book. And I said, I'm feeling all the emotions and I didn't expect to. Because, you know, I wanted to create a life for my son that was picture perfect and ideal, right? And at one point, his father and I weren't together, but he was an excellent father. Even at finding out he was going to be a father at 17, he was very involved. And I was never left alone and had to do it by myself while he was here. But I was very emotional because I'm watching, or reading rather, the interactions you're having with your son and feeling regretful and remorseful that my son doesn't have that. Because as a parent, you want your child to have everything good and not be missing out on anything. So I am happy to see, you know, the interaction you have with your son, but also grieving in my own way that my son doesn't have those interactions.
And when people ask you, why did you write the book? Who'd you write the book for?
Mm-hmm.
So from a marketing standpoint, it's easier to say, I wrote for this demographic. This book isn't written strictly for fathers of sons. This book is written for single mothers that are raising sons. Mm-hmm. This book is written for married couples that both want to that are raising sons. This book is for people who don't have children yet and are thinking about it. Mm-hmm. As long as somebody cares for their community, I believe this book provides value. Mm-hmm. I wanted it to be a resource and not a coffee table book. Mm-hmm. The fact that you said you felt all those emotions is good, because I felt all of them writing it. Mm-hmm. I felt the need on every subject and where people get lost in every aspect of it. So hearing it from a single mother raising a boy, and provided your boy's older than mine, but you could relate, you could understand. Yeah. Oh, wow, that's what his father would have said.
So now I'm going to tell you honestly how I felt about your title before and after reading the book. Mm-hmm. And I'll start with afterwards. After reading your book, I understand exactly what you mean by saying that a son with no father has no direction, or no way to really know how to navigate certain aspects of life. Because I'm a woman, I fully understand that there are things that men go through that I don't. And so there's no way for me to teach him how to navigate dealing with the police, because even though I'm a Black woman and I may deal with police differently than a white woman would, I still don't deal with it on the same level as a Black man. I don't have the same level of tension that may occur with a Black man. Tying a tie, having your first kiss, first date. It's a completely different experience for me than it is for my son. And so I get that. And I understood and appreciated your title once I was finished. When I started reading your book, or when I saw the title of your book, my initial reaction was offense and defensiveness. Because, and I'd love to talk to you about this, because I love that my emotion changed throughout reading the book, but it was because I felt like, well, what do you mean he has no author? It made me feel as, well, are you saying he'll never get anywhere? Are you saying that he's defeated from the very start? And I don't think that's what you meant now that I'm reading it. It's that he would have had a different set of guidelines. And then you also went into how there are men around you, including yourself, that can help fill in those gaps. And I had the conversation with my son, which I often do before these interviews, where we talked about his father. We talked about, his level of guidance and things like that. And I'm very protective over him. So I don't invite any and every man around my child.
Sure.
But he has many influences. And I also raised him with God in his life. I reassured him that he has a father. And he doesn't remember a lot about him. And I don't know if you're familiar with the saying, people will forget what you say, but remember how you made them feel.
That's a fact.
Right. So he can't remember everything his father said. So I made him detail for me how his father made him feel and how he thought he made his father feel. And he was just beaming because he can remember the feeling and he could put it into words and things like that. And I said, count yourself blessed that your father wanted you from the moment he knew you existed. Count yourself blessed that he thought that you were the world and things like that. So anyway, to go back to what I'm saying, I initially took offense. I'm like, well, I can do it. I can raise a boy, which of course I can. But then I love that you really explained it throughout your book.
It's so funny. It's meant to be a gut punch.
Mm-hmm.
You have to stand out. There's a lot of noise in this world, and poignancy matters.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first wrote that title, it was a punchline in a poem. I felt like it was pregnant. It was too big for that one poem. So I wrote a poem about it. And when I finally decided to take on the journey of writing a book, I couldn't think of a better title for a fatherhood book. What I end the poem, the title poem, by saying, a son with no father is much more than a book with no author or a boy with no dad. He is the Immaculate Conception. He is a young God, because you are just a boy's sperm donor. Obvious he wasn't conceived by a man. A masterpiece is a masterpiece, whether it's signed or not.
Mm-hmm.
Feel me?
Mm-hmm.
The Bluest Eye is a masterpiece when you read it, whether you know Toni Morrison read it or not. A Basquiat or a Picasso is the painting. It's a masterpiece, whether you know who did it or not.
Mm-hmm.
However, knowing who did it puts things into context.
Right.
It gives, now you get to ask, why'd you do it? What was your intention?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want it to go? There's all of these means of navigation that are present when you know who the author of the book is. Have you ever read a book that's missing an introduction? No preface to prepare that youngin' for what's coming? That is sincere. Like, from my perspective, I could say the biggest part about this book is, I think, the relatability. Mm-hmm. Where something he goes through and I'm like, oh, let me tell you. When my first crush, and how I was crushed during that.
Right.
That is a relatability that a mother cannot give.
No, of course not.
If she doesn't understand the angst of a little boy.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So
I agree. That
title is meant to ruffle your feather, mm-hmm. and then it's meant to comb it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because that is how I felt. I felt the nerve.
Listen, I have a cousin, God bless him, I love him to death, that, he's pretty well connected. I'm like, yo, where's the support for the book? Like, honestly, I can't get past your title. I ain't have my dad. Like, I felt like you was taking a shot at me almost. Right. And I said, well, did you read the book? He goes, nah. Let's read the book together. And then I broke down, you are a young God. Like, do you know what it takes to raise yourself? in the absence of a man.
Right.
You get all the love that you want from your mother, but the energy from your dad is going to be dramatically different. It's going to be, ergo, that's that alignment that we was talking about with MJ. Mm-hmm. So you are a god, bro. Like, you are a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. You not having the author didn't change that.
Right.
But unfortunately, and something that I can't do, I'm not your dad. I can't write. I can't sign that book. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Feel me?
Yeah, no, I get it.
It's not my book to sign. And every father should be proud as hell to sign that book. Mm-hmm.
I think if I could really just try to sum up, even though you've already done it, so I'm not overshadowing you. If I could try to sum up what it really means is almost like trying to navigate a boat without a sail. It's possible. It's doable. It's more difficult.
Yeah, everything's easier with help.
Yeah. What I took your title for, I like for words to mean what they mean, right?
Yeah.
So what I took your title for was a woman cannot raise a man. The phrasing I prefer and what I think people are trying to relate is a woman cannot teach a boy manly things. Because if you say a woman cannot raise a man, then what does that boy become? It suggests that he does not become a man. And I don't think that is the implication in what people are trying to say. Because if you look at Barack Obama raised by a woman, you would say he is a full-grown man.
Sure.
So yes, they can, I believe we, women, can raise men, but we cannot teach them manly things. Regardless of how many brothers you have and cousins.
If you're a dad with a daughter, you could raise her into a strong, educated woman.
Right.
Great qualities.
Yes.
However, when her cycle comes on,
right.
First time, how do you know to navigate? You might
dealing with her heartbreak.
You might know scientifically how to do it. Mm-hmm. But you don't know what it's like internalized.
Correct. So that's what I took the title to mean, which I've always had an issue with. I love for words to really just like be put on a platter and you look at them and you can soak them up and it's like, okay, I get that. Even if it's covered in gravy and you kind of got to get into the middle of it and see it.
The book title is the epitome of a rabbit hole to me.
Gotcha. Well, Alice in Wonderland.
You're like, do I want to, if I go down that one, I'm going to come out a different person. There's a before and after. Mm-hmm. I want there to be a before I read the book and after I read the book.
Yeah, I have that. I do. Okay, so I want to talk about something else. I want to get into your project in Baltimore schools. Be More. Mm-hmm. Be More. Just Baltimore Be More.
Males organized to raise engagement.
Awesome. Tell me about that. What does that look like?
I started that on the heels of Sandy Hook. Mm-hmm. And I was totally distraught. I didn't feel comfortable anymore in this country with children. It's my first time being slapped in the face with that level of anxiety.
Gotcha.
I cannot sit back, once again, be a thermostat, not a thermometer. Be the agent of change that you want to see.
What were you trying to change?
Every time I went to my son's school, it was like, oh shit, there's a dad here. Mm-hmm.
Who said that? Who was giving you that reaction?
Oh, the front office. Oh, you're present on the parent-teacher night. Oh, dad's here too. All right, good. So see, you're coming from a good family. Because it's normalized. The absence is normalized. Mm-hmm. So, I did them dirty too. I had one of the Baltimore Ravens players come in for Donuts for Dads. I set up a Donuts for Dads because I was on the PTA board, and I had one of them come in and talk. So I got 200 dads in there.
Nice.
And right before they were able to leave, I locked the doors, and then me and another dude gave them a presentation, and I said, I do not need. Let me tell y'all what volunteerism look like. Mm-hmm. I need 3 hours a year. Mm-hmm. If I got 3 hours a year from 200 brothers, that's 600 hours a year.
Right.
And we only need to put 5 hour to 10 hour increments a week.
Doing what though?
So what we did was we would walk throughout the school. First, like I was worried about the physical safety of the kids.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's no police officers in the school, so we would do like just perimeter checks.
Gotcha.
You know, when people came to check their kids out, we would be in the office to ensure that they provided the proper documentation, things of that nature. Then we became almost guidance counselors for kids that were having behavioral issues. So they'll be like, why don't you go walk with Mr. Reyes or Mr. Robinson around the halls and just talk with him for a little bit. So we would give the teachers the breaks that they needed from a child that may have been wrestling with a scenario or a situation. So we would just, being that ad hoc body that they couldn't afford and that was missing. And what it did was it changed the culture of that school.
Okay.
The culture of that school then became, oh, those are the B-more dudes. The fathers were now expected to be there.
Right.
The fathers started making their own friendships and started creating their own side activities and programs. You know, my ex-wife and I made sure we were available for certain direction because it was B-more. So, you know, whether it be legal direction or just being a negotiator between two parties, we were able to assume that role. And I believe my son didn't stay in that school long enough for me to continue it. But I believe what I left them with and the framework I left them with, all somebody had to do was step in and they could continue it.
I think that's really dope. I think that's amazing. I think some people, I won't say everybody, some people don't realize the trauma that these children are dealing with. Whether it's a loss of a parent or drug addiction, alcoholism, loss of a sibling, hunger.
All the trauma that the parents are dealing with.
Yeah.
And then you have to raise a human.
Right.
And try not to project your trauma onto them.
And it's hard. And you know what, these kids, then they don't just belong to their parents. They are a part of the community. I truly believe that it is our job to raise all these children. If you're around them, help raise them. Because the parents might be,
That's that village.
Yeah. The parents may be going through something that they can't emotionally give to that child right now. And that's where we come in, step in, you know?
Right.
I think stuff like that is really dope and important. It's important. It's not an extracurricular activity. It is part of your day job, for sure.
Right.
So tell me, so you speak at schools too. Are these middle schools, elementary, high schools?
I've done all.
All of them. What are you talking about? Are you doing poetry or giving advice?
With the younger kids, I pretty much do poetry, and I'll do like a career day, and I'll tell them about both technology and the poetry part. When I speak to the middle school kids, that energy is a little different because, you know, like that's typically where you make your decision if you want to go left or right.
Yes.
And I like talking with the middle school kids because I could get a little bit more advanced in what I'm talking about. I could give them different kind of poems, and I could speak to them about doing something pragmatic and doing something creative at the same time, and one funding the other until that one could fund everything.
Right.
And that's something when I talk to the high school kids about, but I definitely like talking to the high school kids about how important the next several decisions that they make are going to be.
Yes.
I let them know, like, you're no longer, you want to be, especially because, you know, there's always that one kid in the class that talks too much shit and he's wild and whatever. There's always that one.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah, and I always tell them, yo, use your superpowers for good. Everything you're doing now could yield you amazing returns and recognition in the future. However, if you use it for bad, it's going to get bad very quickly.
Yeah.
You know, and what you don't want to do is be the guy with potential.
Right.
Nobody, you know what potential means? This is what my Air Force sergeant told me. So potentials means you have yet to do shit. Go out there and accomplish something, then I'll give you a real compliment.
I like that.
Think you have potential isn't a compliment.
I like that.
So my concern with them always is understanding what success looks like, understanding that it's not predicated on your job or whatever other accomplishments you get, because nobody wants to be a public success and a private failure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't look like kids no more. You want to be respected as adults, but you don't want any of the responsibility that comes across it.
Right.
And another big lesson I teach them is the difference between responsibility and accountability.
Mm.
If you listen, talk to any high school kid, they're always going to tell you about what's not fair. And I remind them they live in America. Fair doesn't live here.
Mm.
What does live here is things that you have to navigate, a society you have to navigate that is set up against you. And you have to be accountable for every action despite that unfairness. And as you navigate, it is incumbent upon you to turn around and reach back out to those less fortunate and bring them up with you.
Yeah.
If you fail to do that part, if you get out and you pull the ladder up, you're still a failure.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And we need to teach them. But then we've got dudes like you who have kept the ladder down and just pulling people up left and right. And one of my favorite things to say to people, if you ain't going to big yourself up, your friend Keisha will. So, you know, but I think that is, I was going to say admirable. I think it's necessary. It is necessary because
I like that wording better. I don't need to be admired, just acknowledged.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good thing to admire people though and acknowledge them. And I do like acknowledge better. You're right. I think it's a good thing to acknowledge people because if you don't acknowledge them, you would never know that they had anything, that they lived through anything to get here. If you don't acknowledge them, then the little boy or the little girl who has potential doesn't realize that they can still grow out of that and grow into a Mario Reyes or a Keisha Stubbs or a Hazel Barker or whoever. They would never know if you don't acknowledge that. And I would encourage people that when you get out of your situation, whatever it is, tell your story. Tell your story. Somebody needs to hear your story. I'm so grateful that you're telling your story because there's a little boy in Co-op City that is looking at you and saying, I could do that?
People have been shying away from being a role model or example far too long. Mm-hmm. Also, you're allowed to be flawed when you are one. Mm-hmm. You know, you're also allowed to recognize that discretion holds value. Mm-hmm. Everything doesn't need to be shared.
Correct.
That's something that I speak to my people about often.
Correct. Not everything. There's certain parts of your journey that are for you. That's between you and God. So Mario, what is next up for you?
Oh, wow. Next up is my daughter's book.
Yes.
The Hurricane of Her.
Oh, I love that title.
And the way she came through and just washed away all my preconceived notions and made me a better human. I wouldn't just say man. She just made me a better human because after her, I didn't realize how much of a feminist I was. Mm. I didn't realize how much I cared about equality and what true equality looks like. Mm-hmm. Also, we have the score coming out soon with Milk and Sis. We're going to have the audiobook coming out. Once the world opens back up, we'll be doing actual book tours and signings and performances. And we're going to bring all of these various disciplines of art that created this project together. So we have the workshops that we're working on with fathers. I have one today in a couple hours. We have, this, as I said, the score. We're going to have art educational series, not just art for you to purchase, but art for you to review and understand what makes art valuable. How
I like that.
give the artists their flowers while they're here. Don't wait until they're gone to be like, oh, this is a great artist because now I could jack up the price 10,000%. You know, when I first spoke to Charlie about the idea, you know, he's very successful on his own. He didn't need to do this. I communicated to him the sincerity, the passion behind it, and why I thought he was going to be the one. And, you know, even though it took 18 months of me poking and prodding, and then when he finally did it, he turned it around in a week. And when people come to his studio for one of his other amazing pieces of art, they're like, yo, but what's that one? This picture right here is valuated at $12,000 already.
Wow. And
this was a labor of love, and people don't know who's in that picture. It just says a story otherwise.
Right. It's absolutely beautiful.
I was fortunate enough to start learning by somebody at the forefront of their craft. You know, it's my OG. I look at him all the time. I think he's 60 now. I need a friend with more gray hair.
Right.
Give me the right direction.
Yes. Yes. So I want to know where we can find you. So let's start with the workshop. Where can people find the workshop that is fathers and sons coming together, and you all are discussing the workbook from your book and how to navigate fatherhood and manhood? Is that accurate?
Oh, it's called Kingdom Son.
Okay. Bringing
the man out of the child and bringing the child out of the dad. Parenthood should be fun. Yeah. Fatherhood is fun. How do we get there? How do you identify the vulnerability? So it doesn't follow verbatim the workbook, because we started off with manhood. Because I feel like that was such a powerful and much needed lesson. Yes. To give the kids, for them to understand that it's okay to be emotional. That doesn't have to drive your decisions, though. It's okay to cry, and you don't have to wait until you're by yourself. Right. It removes nothing from you. Today's is youth, and what we're really doing is we're creating a curriculum to be duplicated. So that way I could bring this to schools, to prisons, and other locations and programs that are looking for fatherhood engagement. And we could say, hey, this is the academic value, and these are the testimonies.
Gotcha. That's wonderful.
And it's paired. Yeah, man, we having a good time out here.
So where can people find the workshop and be a part of it?
Oh, it's at the Gathering Spot in Atlanta. But you have to follow me on social medias, whether it be on Facebook, Poppy Picasso Poetry, or on Instagram at I Am Poppy Picasso. I also send a newsletter out from my webpage. I created a blog there, and that's www.poppypicassopoetry.com. There you can find all different disciplines. You can find the book, you can find unreleased music, you can find merchandise, you can find written poetry to read. There's just a whole body of just dopeness.
Dope. And you can not only be hired for speaking events, but for your own custom poem, correct?
Oh yeah. I've done a lot of those recently. Like, you know, you could give me any topic and I'll write about it. So what I'll do is I like finding brands that want to articulate their vision, but haven't been able to merge into the artists. Artists control the narrative of society. You get the right artist, and I want to learn about the principles of your business. I want to understand the story of what brought it there. And then once I understand that, I'll work with you on promoting it, and we'll get there together.
Dope. So I know you have a lot of quotes that you love, but do you have a favorite?
Society prepares the crime. The criminal commits it.
Ooh. Okay. I haven't heard that one before. Is that yours?
No, that's not mine. I got that in a fortune cookie. Swear to God.
It's good though.
When I read that one, I was like, oh, God got the right one today.
Right? That's really
my
good.
My favorite quote from myself. my character is more valuable than my accomplishment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that people always want to believe the value is only shown after you have the accomplishment. And by saying that, they means that whatever the ends justify the means. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that. I believe the ends are just as important as the means.
And say it again, my character.
My character is more important than my accomplishment.
I think that is an awesome quote for anybody, but I really think that is a truly valuable quote for men. I tell my son all the time that his character should precede him. You know, he should really, really take care of what his character is. And I think that is a dope quote for men specifically. Not that women can't use it, but I think for men specifically, that's amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mario, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Mine.
I really enjoyed speaking with you today, reading your book, picking your brain. I look forward to picking your brain and seeing you perform live in person.
Sure. I'm looking forward to COVID being over so we can get back to real business. I want this energy. I want to see the look on the people's faces. I want to shake the hands of the people that read the book. I want to give hugs out again.
Right?
We're not meant for this.
No. We need to get out there into the world. I'm excited to get back into it. Just, hey, y'all, stay inside for like 3 weeks. Let's get rid of this. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly. Like, yo, if we were disciplined up front, we wouldn't be dealing with what we're dealing with now.
Okay. Everybody wants to go back outside. So stay in the house. Mario, truly a pleasure. I look forward to speaking with you again soon in the future.
Looking forward to it as well. You have a good one. God bless.
Thank you. God bless. Why do you think there are so few Black males that are educators in the U.S.?
I don't think it's not an appealing field. Just like we're now getting a surge. Think about like the medical industry, right? Initially, when you think about nurses, you think about a lot of women. Mm-hmm. I think like just as an American culture, just naturally, it wasn't the education field, like, and the nursing field didn't seem, I guess, something for men to do. It didn't seem testosterone filled, you know.
Right.
It was more like a nurturing type of profession in the beginning. So I think when as we evolved as a nation, and we realized, oh no, this is a field for men and women as well. You see more male nurses now. Now you're starting to see more male teachers, but the lack of Black male educators, for me, I don't think it was something that was appealing until I saw somebody that looked like me.